Thank you for being with us, Potterheads. We've got a new chapter for Backward with Purpose, Part 1, Always and Always, by Dead Woodpecker. Here we are with Chapter 35, Diagon Alley.
Chapter 35, Diagon Alley. Chapter text. The arrival of the Hogwarts letters came as a complete surprise to Harry and Ron. The dilemma of another time traveler, and attempting to ascertain the person's identity and motives, had consumed them for the 2 weeks prior to the arrival of the stately owls. The fact that they were no longer considered criminals, were perfectly free to return to Hogwarts, and would, in fact, be heading to school with the other sixth years, had not truly hit them. "Blimey," Ron said over lunch, 2 hours after he had ripped open his letter and supply list with an expression of great shock. "Blimey, I can't believe we're going back." "Ron, would you please stop saying that?" Hermione, who Harry thought had been quite patient, finally snapped. "Please? It's just that you've said it so many times." "It is a little weird," Harry said. He felt the need to defend his best mate, especially since he knew exactly where Ron was coming from. An entire year had passed at Grimmauld Place. It had been a very long year in many ways. Sometimes Harry felt that he had spent the time playing an especially vicious chess game with Ron. That, however, was not entirely accurate. He'd spent the last year locked in battle with Voldemort. Has it really only been 4 months since the Weasleys arrived? I mean, we've been in hiding, and the Ministry's been hunting us down. Now we go back to Hogwarts. Ginny and Hermione exchanged exasperated looks. "Harry," Ginny said, "you've also said that many times." "I can't imagine why the both of you are so shocked," Hermione added. "We've talked about going back. We've discussed the ramifications of not taking our OWLs with Albus. I suppose I've got to get used to calling him Professor Dumbledore again. And we've agreed to take them next week, which is why we've been revising the 5th year spells. Just last night, you were having a laugh with Sirius and making plans to set Friday evenings aside for Debaugh." All right. Ron lifted his hands in a gesture of surrender. "So maybe we shouldn't be surprised. But I kept thinking it wasn't actually going to happen. You know, like when you're a little kid and you're really excited for Christmas, but when Christmas Eve finally comes and you're—" "Don't pretend like you don't still get excited about Christmas, Ron," Ginny said. "I saw you last year, if you remember." The tips of Ron's ears turned red. "That wasn't because of presents." "Ron," Hermione said, scandalized. "Don't tell them." "I wasn't going to," Ron said. "But you just did. Or told them enough. Anyway." Harry snorted. Did they think that he and Ginny didn't know what they'd been up to over the last year? It certainly didn't take a seer to know that Hermione and Ron had advanced a little further than kissing even before Hermione had decided to help Ron through the shock of the appearance of his entire family. He eyed Ron. Ron's lips twitched. Harry took this to mean that Ron had, in fact, known that they would guess. It was Hermione's delicate sensibilities that were being protected. Hermione's cheeks turned bright red. Fred and George stumped into the kitchen. Harry felt the muscles in his face jump, but he forced himself to relax and threw themselves down into empty chairs. Luna and Neville followed them in. All 4 of them looked extremely grumpy. "What's the matter, everyone?" Harry asked. All 4 exchanged glances. "Nothing," they chorused as one. Fred swiped an apple and bit into it. "What are you lots so cheery about?" "We're just talking about sex," Ginny said cheerfully, just to push her brother's buttons. Fred choked. "Anapneo," she said calmly. A bite of apple flew out of his mouth and splat wetly against the side of George's face. "Sorry, George." Harry watched the twins closely. He had to admit to some surprise that the sleeping arrangements had not been challenged. He knew that Ginny had been prepared to have several things to say if any of her family attempted to enforce rules that no longer applied to them. But 4 months had passed, and not one of them had mentioned it. It made Harry feel slightly edgy. He had no way of telling if trouble was brewing, and he could hardly ask one of the twins if they had a problem with him sleeping with their sister. "Ginny," Hermione whispered, horrified. "Oh ho," Fred said, grinning at Ron. Has our little Ron finally stopped having to wah? "Get a rest, Fred," said Ginny. Hermione looked as though she wanted to run right out of the room. "Seriously," Ron said, "what's got you lot looking like Annie Muriel's on her way to stay with us?" We're tired of not doing anything, George said moodily. He pulled out a crumpled copy of the Daily Prophet and tossed it onto the table. Harry already knew what this was about. He had read this morning's issue of the Wizarding newspaper. Unfortunately, the journalists had been taking jabs at the Weasleys, and this morning's story was particularly bad. The stupid prophet thinks we're a bunch of arses. There was an uncomfortable silence. You know why you're not declaring support? Harry pointed out finally. If Voldemort. We don't care about you-know-who. Fred said loudly. Can't we move in here like Percy? We could leave the shop, George said, though he sounded forlorn. We could do what Mad-Eye does, and we could... You don't have the experience to do what Mad-Eye does, Ron said. We've been practicing with you lot every night. No matter how much you practice, Ginny said, it's never going to be the same when it actually happens. You can learn all the spells you want, but when you're actually there, when you're actually fighting, and who are you to say that we're not ready? Fred said. He glared stonily at the table. Harry found that he could not really blame him. I know you've come back in time and all, but George and I are of age, and we think it ought to be our decision. It isn't, Harry said. It should be, George said mutinously. We want to help you. We want to fight Death Eaters and... Harry, Neville spoke up suddenly. Harry started. He had nearly forgotten that Neville was there. Harry, what if they did fight? The Weasleys, they can use Polyjuice Potion, Neville said stubbornly. Harry could tell from a steady look in Neville's eyes that he had thought of this before. Harry sat back. This was, unfortunately, a solution that had not really occurred to him. He was certain, very important, that the Weasleys remain hidden allies with the rest. More than that, Dumbledore was certain. Mr. Weasley was able to help them sort out the Imperius from the genuine servants of Voldemort at the Ministry. As Percy was in hiding, he could not do this. Bill and Fleur likewise needed to be above suspicion. When the time came for them to break into Gringotts, they'd need them. The others, Fred and George, Charlie, and Mrs. Weasley needed to keep the secret safe. Harry poked at his thoughts. Polyjuice Potion was an extremely effective disguise. There would be no reason or no time during battle to use the spell that could detect it. Even if the Death Eaters suspected that Harry's allies actually wore another face, there was no spell that could actually reveal it, only detect if it was in use. And how often had he used the potion both in this timeline and the last? The risk was minimal. But what are the benefits? Harry glanced over at the twins and Neville and Luna. They were watching him carefully. Neville looked stubborn. Luna was apparently unfazed, and the twins appeared to be caught in the middle between hope and fear. That's what decided Harry. The twins were funny and enjoyed laughter and jokes at the expense of others, but they knew the line between courage and bravado. Harry suspected that the nightly sessions with Mad-Eye had something to do with this. All right, Harry said finally. Ginny and Ron gaped at him. But you're not to reveal who you are under any circumstances. Except, of course, if you're captured. He frowned at them. I suppose we can also transfigure your faces underneath the Polyjuice Potion. Would that work, Hermione? I expect so, Hermione said. The potion could wear off, and the spell could remain. It would be good to have an added layer of protection. Is it likely? Fred asked. The skin around his mouth was white. Getting captured? It isn't impossible, Hermione answered. Though you'll probably get killed before that happens, Ron said. Why don't you come with us to Diagon Alley tomorrow? Harry said. He looked around the table. We'll use a muggle disguise for the twins. Although we should ask Moody to get more hair from Death Eaters. We could get them in trouble with Voldemort if they were seen with us, and he'd kill them himself. Harry was relieved to note that the twins did not appear overly excited, and that is what primarily kept him from changing his mind. The other two reasons for not doing so were Moody and Percy, who would also be accompanying them to Diagon Alley. Not only would they add to their numbers, but Moody was uniquely qualified to curb Fred and George's high spirits. Still, Harry felt uneasy as he tumbled out of the fireplace at the Leaky Cauldron. Fred and George looked so completely different from one another that no one would be able to tell they were twins at all, let alone the Weasley twins. And Neville and Luna had taken on their appearance, with a strict promise that they would not use the bathroom, to man Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. I'm turning into Mad-Eye, Harry thought ruefully. Ginny had accused him of being a bit paranoid just that morning. They all waved a hello to Tom and headed out to the entrance to the alley. Ron, grinning, drew his wand and tapped the bricks. "Feels good, doesn't it?" "Oh, yes." Hermione beamed at him. "Excuse me." Harry turned around to see a small family looking stunned and hesitant. A little girl held the mother's hand. She was young enough that she still found comfort in sucking her thumb. A young boy, who was beaming, looked to be about 11 and just about to start his first year at Hogwarts. "Oh, hello," Hermione said. "Are you wondering how to get into the alley?" Yes," the father said. "The wizard in there said that we could follow you." "Not a problem," Ron said, as the bricks rearranged themselves. He looked down at the young boy. "Once you get your wand, have Tom teach you how to let your parents and sister in. It's really easy." "Thanks," the boy said enthusiastically. He darted around Ron and entered the alley. "Wow, Mom, Dad, Ellie, it's amazing. Come on, come on, come on." "It's real," the woman breathed. "It's really real. Robert, there really is a magical alley right in the middle of London." "Want to see? Want to see?" the small girl yelled. She bounced in her father's arms. "Good luck," Hermione said warmly. "You might want to stop at Gringotts first. You can exchange your money with wizard money. My parents are muggles, so we always went there straight away. It's the big white building. You can't miss it." The little family nodded their thanks and followed their son with an air of wide-eyed delight. Their enthusiasm for the magical world seemed very out of place. People rushed back and forth, hurrying from store to store. The sense of fear was heavy in the air. Harry looked around. There were no school-aged children here. Parents were likely too frightened of Voldemort and his Death Eaters to allow them to come. Probably for the best. They moved together loosely, standing far enough apart that they all had room to maneuver and aim, and close enough to shield each other if it was needed. Not that Harry thought it would, but after living with Moody for an entire year, his paranoia had only increased. He glanced over at the twins. They and Percy were slightly clumsier, but they caught on. "Should we get our books first?" Ron asked. "Of course," Hermione said promptly. "It's the most important thing." Flourish and Blotts was slightly crowded with harried-looking parents and 2 shopkeepers. No one was happy, though they stopped and stared at Harry and the others. They did not move or speak, only watched him with confused expressions. Harry ignored them, found the books they needed, and hurried out of the store. "Apothecary," he said quietly. He felt a prickling sense of unease, though he tried to tell himself that it had been caused by being goggled like a creature in a zoo. He met Moody's eye. "We'll get our potion supplies, and then we're leaving." No one argued. The experience in the store that sold potion supplies was similar to that of what had happened at the bookstore. Although, Harry had to admit that the shopkeepers at Flourish and Blotts had not dropped a large barrel of dragon dung in shock. He wrinkled his nose and refilled his basic potion ingredients. "How long has it been since I've been here?" Harry thought. He tried to remember, and thought it might have been right before he'd started his 3rd year. 3 years had completely changed the alley in ways that hurt. Stores had gone out of business. People did not call out to each other in greeting, nor did they stop to look in the windows. It felt ominous, and Harry bounced from foot to foot in his agitation to leave. "Ugh, I don't think I'll ever get that smell out of my hair," Ginny said, looking revolted, once they stepped out of the apothecary. It had taken half an hour. Far too long. "Did you see it, Dad?" The same little boy who had entered the alley behind them beamed. "It chose me. That man said that wands choose the wizards. Isn't that great? Can we go to that broom store now? Did you see how they flew? I can't believe that brooms actually fly. I can't wait to try it." Harry stared as the boy and his family strode around the corner into sight. They had just exited the New Wand shop and were walking by the mouth of Knockturn Alley. The shadows around it seemed especially quick. It seemed to happen in slow motion. A burst of red sparks shot into the air. Harry began to run, but he was not quick enough. There was a flash of green light, and the little boy toppled over. He was dead. Blood thundered through Harry's veins, and he sent a reductor curse into the shadows. There was a blast of light, and someone screamed. "Get down!" Harry shouted at the parents. He saw movement. There was another bang, and the father fell to the ground with a heavy thud. Harry aimed at where the spell had come from and said incendio. A man's voice yelled in pain, and a billow of smoke appeared. More curses flew past Harry's ear. The others had followed. Go see if there are any more. Harry shouted at Mad-Eye and Percy, but he already knew the answer. Screams echoed around the alley, and Harry could see flashes of light coming from other sections out the corners of his eyes. Percy ran toward Gringotts, and Mad-Eye tore off to the entrance. Ron wavered a moment, grabbed Hermione, and pulled her after Percy. Shit, Fred whispered. Shit, 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 shit. Hold it together, Harry ordered. Well, if it isn't. Harry did not let the witch who had stepped delicately out of the shadows finish. She was followed by 4 other Death Eaters, and she appeared overly confident. Sectum Sempra, he roared, and she opened up from throat to stomach. Ginny grabbed the mother and the small girl, who were standing, frozen with horror, and staring at the unmistakably dead bodies of the rest of their family. She had a shield charm up between the Death Eaters and the Muggle family in a second. We need to get you out of here, Ginny whispered. Her voice broke. The mother's eyes were glassy with shock. I don't understand. I don't. They were just walking. Mudbloods and filth have no place in Diagon Alley, said a Death Eater. He was young, but Harry killed him with another cutting curse anyway. The moment he felt an intense burn in his leg, and he fell to the ground unable to breathe through the pain. He rolled over, jerked his wand up, and sent the Death Eater who had attacked him from behind up into the air. Fred stared at him for a moment, raised his own wand, and sent a bludgeoning hex so strong that the man's neck snapped in half. Fred lowered his wand, looking shocked. Don't fall apart, Harry said. He tried to scramble to his feet, but fell over and missed a killing curse by an inch. Ginny screamed a word. There was a wet splatter, and a body thudded to the ground, and Harry redoubled his efforts. Skeepy. The pain eased up enough for him to stagger to his feet. George dueled a masked Death Eater who appeared to be a woman, and Fred was running down the alley to help Moody. Fred, no, Harry shouted, but Fred ignored him and kept going. The alley was so loud that it hurt Harry's head. Explosions came from the direction Ron, Hermione, and Percy had run off to, and everywhere, people were screaming. Are you all right? Harry asked Ginny. I'm fine, she said, but she gestured helplessly at the ground. The mother and the daughter lay on the ground. They had joined their boys in death. I couldn't. You know that shield charms. Not now, Harry said grimly, but he squeezed her hand. He could hear Ron yelling in rage from around the corner, and knew that he had it well in hand. Let's go after Mad-Eye. Harry limped as quickly as he could. He pressed his wand to his throat and, thanking Merlin that Kingsley was not at the ministry today, sent his Patronus. Death Eaters in Diagon Alley. Every step was torturous, and Harry was sweating and sick from the pain by the time they reached another twist. The fighting was loud. George made to run around the corner, but Harry grabbed his robes and pulled him back. A moment, he said. He sent the Specs spell around the corner and felt a moment of disorientation when he saw 2 scenes simultaneously. There are 3 of them, 2 on the right, 1 on the left. George pushed away from Harry and jumped right into the fray. Ginny followed him, and Harry followed her. Ginny already had her wand raised and had levitated a concrete planter. Without a moment of hesitation, she let it fall on the Death Eater dueling Fred. A jet of purple light arced out of a wand, and Mad-Eye fell over, screaming in pain. Sectum Sempra, Harry shouted. He missed the Death Eater, but Fred burned him before he could retaliate. Silence fell, stifling and oppressive. Harry's heartbeat slowly returned to normal, and he hobbled after Ginny to check on Moody. He's alive, Ginny said. I can't tell what kind of curse it was. I'll have him sent to St. Mungo's, said Kingsley. Harry looked up, relieved. Ron, Hermione, and Percy, he croaked. We're right here, Ron said. Or Shacklebolt, isn't it? One of the Death Eaters got away. Are the rest dead? Kingsley asked, looking around. Harry did not want to count how many bodies there were. He could see at least 5 bodies of regular citizens from right here, and that did not count the little family. Yes, Harry said fiercely. He met Kingsley's eyes. His leg gave out, and Ron caught him by the elbow to keep him upright. Harry was barely aware of more horrors arriving. He was only glad that he would not have to talk to them about what had happened. Kingsley was taking their statements down, and with the ministry bending over backward to make things up to Harry, he did not think that any of his statements would be challenged. "You might want to visit St. Mungo's as well, Mr. Potter," Kingsley said once they had finished. Harry glanced around at his friends. Hermione had confessed that one of her own spells had caused the death of an enemy. She was very pale and trembled from head to toe. Harry suspected that she had vomited after she had done it. Harry remembered the first time he had killed a man, and he had thrown up his previous 3 meals once he'd thought about it. Fred and George were likewise shaken. Percy's lips trembled, though he tried to hide it. "No," Harry said, knowing that his place was with them. "I think I'm going to go home." HPHPHPHPHPHPHPHP. The attack on Diagon Alley and the ramifications of what had happened settled over Grimmauld Place and Godric's Hollow like a palpable chill. Despite it being August, fires were lit in the hearths. Harry, huddled on a sofa next to Ginny, wondered if this was what it was like to be a Muggle and not be able to see Dementors. He felt like there was one in the house. Everyone was white and pale with shock. Mrs. Weasley had brought out her knitting, but it was going haphazardly at best. She had not been there, of course, but Mr. Weasley had told her everything once he had come home from work. She looked very small, as if this horrible first real act of war had diminished her somehow. Harry wanted to say something to her, but did not know how to bridge the gap, nor did he know if he wanted that distance breached. He turned away from her. The twins were pale beneath their freckles. They'd done well, very well, and Harry was impressed. Disregarding that one foolish stunt that could have had tragic consequences, Harry had been happy to have them fighting beside him. Not to mention, Harry thought ruefully, that they aren't the only ones to do foolish things during battle. Ginny rubbed more healing salve onto his leg, and the burn eased up. She'd been applying it every 10 minutes since they had returned to Grimmauld Place, and his thigh was beginning to look less like raw meat and more like an actual leg. Not that he looked down on it very often. It made him queasy. "It's always like this, then," George said in a hollow voice. He was looking down at his hands as if he had never seen them before. Harry understood. "Yes," he said as gently as he could. Though it was bad. He closed his eyes and saw the 2 children and their parents. He clenched his fist until his knuckles were white. The more he had time to think about it, the more he ought to have expected something like this to happen. The rules had clearly changed, and Voldemort could not be expected to act in the same way. And it wasn't as if he had been quiet last time, but this attack on Diagon Alley had happened 2 years sooner, and in a much more spectacular way. "Lucky Voldemort wasn't there," Ron murmured. Hermione had stopped retching, but had her head in his lap. She had killed, inadvertently, for the first time today. "If he'd known you'd be there." "Yeah," Harry said. Had Voldemort been there, more bodies would have littered the streets. He felt a surge of rage that punched through the weariness and pain. Those Muggle parents had just been buying school things for their wizard son. The little girl might not have even been a witch. They'd probably not had any idea, none at all, that the magical world was so unbalanced that they would die trying to buy supplies. Why didn't Snape know? Neville asked. You don't think that Voldemort suspects him, do you?" "No," Harry said. He would know when Voldemort realized that Snape was not his ally. The fury that would burn across their connection would be great. "I suspect that Snape is busy with Draco, and Voldemort didn't bother telling him. You heard what they said, have a little fun, and then get out." "Why did he do it?" Fred asked. He sounded a little helpless, and Harry knew this feeling well. Had he ever really, truly understood how Voldemort could be so cruel and monstrous? "To cause fear," Harry said. "The Aurors are running ragged, trying to put out fires and contain Death Eaters. They know it's only a matter of time before Azkaban is overwhelmed, and Voldemort's army is far too large. A direct strike on what's supposed to be a safe place. How many people just decided to stay inside and wait for this to pass without fighting?" "Voldemort did it as a show of power," Ron said in a subdued voice. "Remember when he did it to Hogsmeade, Harry? We took down some of his forces. We only let 1 get away out of 12. The world will think that he's got such a huge army that he can afford to lose a dozen people. But But Voldemort doesn't care, Harry said. If you want to make an example, he doesn't care how many people die. He probably figured that they'd be taken down by Aurors, though, and sent to Azkaban. His voice trailed away into silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock was especially loud, and Grimmauld Place felt like the gloomy place it had once been. Harry realized that no matter how much death he had seen, it never got better. It was not something that he could get used to. He could not make jokes, and neither could Ginny or Ron, about innocents dying. They could not laugh it off with their particular brand of dark humor, as they did killing Death Eaters. Harry knew that he would see the faces of the children and the parents and the others who had been murdered until the day he died. Remembering that that day was swiftly approaching, he set his teeth. Always and always. We should. Mrs. Weasley spoke up. Then, more confident. Isn't there something we can do? We're doing everything we can, Mum, Ginny said forcefully. She didn't look at her mother, but continued applying the salve, though not as gently as she did before. Harry squeezed her hand. Ginny was not finding it easy to forgive her parents, though she seemed more casual and at ease in their presence than Ron. What'd you expect us to do? Ron asked harshly. We can't be everywhere at once. I meant for the Muggleborns, Mrs. Weasley said. Her voice quavered a little. The children and their parents. Well, shouldn't they have a safe place? For when Viva-you-know-who comes back. Harry gaped at her. It was an idea that immediately caught his full attention. The Muggleborns were the members of the wizarding community that needed the most protection against Voldemort. As soon as the Ministry was taken, they'd be rounded up and murdered or sent to Azkaban. Is it because I'm a bloke that I always thought of the battle bits? Harry thought with consternation. If they found a safe place, but what place could be big enough? Not Hogwarts. We need a bunch of small, safe houses, Harry murmured. What? Ron said blankly. Hermione drew in a sharp breath. We can alert the other members of the Order, Harry said. We'll use secret keepers, place a bunch of small houses under the Fidelius charm, and the Muggleborns will have a safe place. They won't have to run around hiding all the time. Perfect, Harry, Hermione said. It wasn't my idea. Harry tipped his head toward Mrs. Weasley. He smiled at her. Good one, Mrs. Weasley. He stood up, despite the fact that his legs still burned a little, and sent a Patronus message to Dumbledore. Have idea. Come see us. It took Dumbledore an hour before he appeared in a swirl of green flames. By then, Harry and the others had hammered out some of the finer details of the plan. It was actually quite simple, and he had to suppress the pang of guilt that came when he saw Mrs. Weasley's enthusiasm. Hogwarts has records, yes? Harry finished. And so does the Ministry, I'm assuming. The Muggleborn Registration Commission had a comprehensive list of suspected Muggleborns. I'm assuming that we can compile our own to protect, not to track. Arthur has contact with many Muggleborns, Mrs. Weasley pointed out. He can't be seen doing anything to jeopardize his standing, Harry said implacably. This was a problem, as he really was in the best position to help the Muggleborns. But as the inevitable fall of the Ministry grew closer and closer, the need for someone Harry could trust implicitly to keep a close watch on the Ministry grew even deeper. Kingsley and Tonks were Aurors, and would likely not have the level of trust that Mr. Weasley had. Mr. Weasley had never hunted down dark wizards. Tonks was likely going to have to go into hiding anyway, as her father was Muggleborn. He'll have to do it subtly. Ask him to make a list of all the Muggleborns he knows and their families. If he can find out whether or not it would be doable for them to go into hiding for however long it takes, and if their homes are large enough to support another family. I'll have Minerva compile a similar list of Muggleborn students, Dumbledore said. She and Phileas have always been in charge of alerting them since shortly after I became headmaster, and they are best prepared to handle this. This sensation of doing something that did not involve killing more Death Eaters, however much the idea appealed to him, did much to ease the fear and grief that had been caused by the battle in Diagon Alley. Harry felt as though he were moving forward with purpose and not continuing to fight the many-headed snake. Is fighting, though, Harry thought, just in a different way. He thought of how the Muggleborns had been slaughtered and felt a wave of relief. That won't happen again. Not again. Thank you, Mrs. Weasley, he said quietly. He looked at her directly in the eye for the very first time, and she abruptly turned away as if she had been slapped. I didn't really do anything, she said. Order members trickled in and stayed the evening, each of them delighted by the idea that had formed that day. There were a few setbacks. Organizing something this huge that involved thousands of people and required speed, as none of them knew when, exactly, the ministry would topple over, was a feat that daunted even Dumbledore. The largest problem was living arrangements. But why can't they all just stay in their own houses? Ron asked. Think about how careful we had to be at Grimmauld Place, Harry whispered. Daedalus Diggle and Elphias Doge talked jovially together about the supplies needed to implement the plan. They weren't listening, but Harry had to be careful not to say anything unusual in front of those members of the Order who did not know the full secret. Remember when they almost caught your dad when he apparat a little too far away from the door? If Voldemort figures out that they're under the Fidelius charm, he and his followers are going to be relentless. Maybe not to all of them, but it'd be like living in a glass bowl. Ron nodded. I imagine that getting supplies to them would be difficult as well. Mr. Weasley, Harry said. Mr. Weasley had arrived at 9:30 and seemed both overwhelmed and pleased by the new plan. Do you still have that friend in the Department of Magical Transportation? Because we'll need someone working in the office of the Floo Network. How did you? Mr. Weasley began, but stopped himself. The top of his head turned bright red. Sorry, he murmured. And I do actually. My brother's niece works in there, and she's a good sort. But is she trustworthy? Harry asked himself. Could she be trusted not to give anything away? Still don't know where we're going to put them. Hestia Jones and Kingsley Shacklebolt were talking in raised voices, though neither one sounded angry, only intent. I've got room for at least 4 other people, Kingsley said in his deep voice. And I might manage 6 if I can magic another room. My lot will only fit 1 more, though. Harry, Neville said loudly. I've only just remembered. I'm an idiot, but I own my grand's house, and it's huge. I can probably fit about 20 people in there. And if I don't know any better, Kingsley grinned, you can probably magic it to almost twice that. Harry felt his eyes go round, and Ron gaped at Neville. You're one of those really old, pure blood families, aren't you? Ron said. I haven't got any money, really, Neville said. But we got the house. Harry sat back and took it all in. After what had happened, he felt a pang of sadness when he thought of the little family. He had no idea that hours later they would all be imbued with a sense of purpose. Ginny scooted her chair closer to him and gripped his hand tightly. She smiled at him and brushed her long hair out of her face. How's your leg? She asked. Harry had almost forgotten that he had taken nasty curse today. It's fine. I'd forgotten about it, actually. Ginny snorted. That's my Harry, she said. So stoic. This was a good idea that your mum had, Harry said quietly. We really should have thought of it, Ginny said. She shook her head in wonder. Honestly, how long have we been planning this? Not long enough, apparently, Harry said dryly. Maybe it took being a mother to figure it out. He gave her a significant look, and her face immediately stiffened. Don't push it, Harry, she said sharply. I can't just ignore these last few years. And I still think you're being a hypocrite. You can barely stand to be in the same room as them. You can't just expect me to forgive and forget just because you think I should. I know. Harry laced her fingers with hers. He was glad that she let him. I know I'm not exactly living up to what I say, but she's your mother and nothing changes that, Ginny said. Still, they broke our hearts, Harry. I will never forget the look on your face when they kicked you out of the burrow. And every time I try to let it go, it just keeps coming back. But I'm trying. Good. Just keep at it, won't you? Harry said. He had full faith in his belief that both Ginny and Ron would regain their former relationship. He wished he could see it happen, but he had a feeling that it would take years, not months. Her expression shifted, and that hard, blazing look he loved so much settled on her face. He fought the urge to kiss her and wondered if she knew what he was thinking. I know what you're thinking, she said. Harry, I really wish that you would have a little optimism. Harry forced himself not to look away. I'm trying, he said carefully, but any hope he had of surviving was dwindling away with every day that Hermione did not magically point to some obscure text that outlined a way to survive the killing curse when one was a Horcrux. "I'll have faith for the both of us, then," Ginny said. Harry was amazed by her calm acceptance of the fact that he had little chance of survival. He would have been frantic if it had been her. It gave him a sick feeling in his stomach to imagine her being in his shoes, of imagining any one of the people in this room being in his shoes. He did not think that he would be able to watch any of those he loved stand in front of Voldemort's wand without making a move to defend. For the first time, Harry realized that he was glad it was him. "How do you do that?" he asked. "I can't imagine what I'd be doing right now." "Don't think that I'm sitting by and doing nothing," Ginny said sharply. "Do you realize that every student in the castle has been questioned, under Veritaserum, about the missing cloak? I had Potter's army do that last year, and believe me, it was tricky, and I'm going to have the twins track down the students who graduated after your third year and question them. I'm not going to sacrifice you, Harry." Harry gaped at her. He had no idea. It constantly amazed him that Ginny loved him with the same intensity as he loved her. Harry, do you remember what I told you?" Ginny said in such a low voice that Harry leaned closer to hear her. Harry was at a loss. He remembered lots of things that Ginny told him, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly which one. I told you that if you didn't make it, I'd come back for you. I'm not going to let you die. Not forever. I don't care how many times I have to redo this." He leaned his forehead against hers. I think you might just be the only person who wouldn't get hexed in next week for being Merlin. Do you think it's you?" "I'm not sure," Ginny said. Her brow was furrowed. "I can very easily see myself making another jump in time if it meant saving you. But it doesn't seem like your style," Harry told her. "Yeah, I've thought about it. You wouldn't mess with my head like that, would you?" "I can't imagine why I would," Ginny replied. She grinned slyly at him. "I mess with other things. Maybe." Harry leaned back in his chair, stretched exaggeratedly, and stifled a huge, fake yawn. "I'm knackered," he said feelingly for the benefit of everyone around them. "I think I'm going to bed." He did not think that they had fooled anyone. Harry got very little sleep over the next few days. September first approached rapidly, and what felt like 3,000 things had to be done. He, Ginny, Ron, and Hermione traveled to the Ministry of Magic to take their OWLs 4 days after they had come up with their plan to help the Muggleborns escape from the rapidly approaching darkness. Even Hermione had found the exams to be somewhat of a waste of time. Whenever they were not sleeping, they worked on their plan. "What's this about, though?" Harry asked. He had just watched Dumbledore and Kingsley add another room in Kingsley's house. It was spacious, and they had done it without real effort. "Why can't you just add another room? Or 10 more? The Department of Magical Property has a thing to say against that," Kingsley said, amused. "I purchased this home without the intent of creating a mansion for myself, though I left myself the option to create another room. We're lucky that Moody got his own house back. He can add 5 more rooms. I could conceivably petition to add another few rooms, but that would take time that we simply don't know we have. And if everyone did it, it would look suspicious," Harry said. "Damn, it would just be so easy." "You have not yet visited Neville's home?" Dumbledore asked. "You know I'm waiting until it's placed under the Fidelius charm." Harry checked his watch. "He and Sirius are doing it right now, I think." "Indeed," Dumbledore nodded. "You will find that with the older families, the homes that have been passed down from generation to generation have a greater potential for being enlarged. It was much cheaper to purchase the permits long ago. It was almost expected for pure bloods to have personal castles. Like Malfoy Manor," Ron said darkly. "I hope we got enough room for all of them," Ginny said. Harry thought of the growing list that Arthur Weasley, Kingsley, and Tonks were compiling, and suddenly the room seemed very small. "We will," Harry forced out. Optimism, like bitterness, was also a choice.